Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. Before we get into the episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, Outer. You know I've raved about Outer before, and I love my Outer sofa, outdoor dining table, and chairs. I've had them for over a year, and let me tell you, they've been through everything from rainstorms to scorching sun and still look brand new. That's because Outer makes outdoor furniture that's actually designed for the outdoors. From using incredibly durable and sustainable materials to developing innovative solutions like the Outer shell cover, which protects my sofa and dining table against dust, debris, and dirt. No more soggy cushions or dusty tabletops. My Outer setup is always clean, dry, and ready to be enjoyed anytime I want. Head to liveouter.com/thefounderhour to see Outer's range of outdoor furniture, fire pits, and accessories. The Founder Hour listeners get an exclusive 10% off for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. So elevate your outdoor space with Outer. That's liveouter.com/thefounderhour. Here we go. Chef Niki, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful to have you here. We're here in your beautiful restaurant in Naka, which I understand you recently did a renovation, so we'll talk about all that.
Okay.
But before we do, let's take it back to your early days. I know you grew up in LA, born to Japanese parents. What was life like for you, growing up? What kind of kid were you? What were you into?
As a kid, I think I was really rambunctious, if that's a good word to describe myself.
Great word.
I really enjoyed exploring. So my sister is 4 years older and my brother's 11 years older than I am. So I spent a lot of time sort of like hanging out with myself if I wasn't with friends. And there was always something that I was interested in, and I was easily influenced by things I saw on TV. So it's like one week I'd want to be a pirate, the next week a private investigator, like I wanted a Batman cave. There are all these things I wanted to explore as a kid. But I think that really helped create and spur this imaginative lifestyle that I wanted for myself. And I always thought that it would be amazing to really experience life to the fullest as much as possible. So I think to this day, my yeses have always been to new experiences because I feel that that's what makes life fulfilling, and also there's always something to learn.
Yeah, sounds like you were a very imaginative
kid. I was. I had crazy ideas all the time.
Yeah. Were you also artistic?
I never thought of myself as being artistic, but I really gravitated toward music when I was like 12. And I thought, wow, this is such a wonderful thing to experience, because I think I just love the way that music always made me feel, and I wanted that in my life, and I wanted to be a part of that world and to learn and to play, and I just felt that it was something that spoke to me really deeply.
Yeah. Did you learn certain instruments?
I wanted to, and I tried to convince my mom, but my mom was very practical, so she didn't have time to drive me around to take music lessons or things like that. So I always had these like fake guitars that were like toys back in the day, and I'd pretend that I could play it really well, and that was like the gist of it.
Yeah. I know being a kid and having such a strong imagination, sometimes it's really hard to decide, I guess once you get older, like what you want to be, because you've kind of explored, even in your head, just so many different paths and avenues, right? And interests, where it's like, how do I decide? How do I decide, like, this is what I'm meant to do?
Totally.
Were there other things aside from cooking? I don't know how early in life you decided like you wanted to be a chef or be in the culinary world, but were there other things that you thought maybe you'd do?
I thought that, so when I was growing up, I wanted to please my parents, and of course, being Asian, that meant like following the path of doctor or lawyer. And I thought for a long time I wanted to go into medicine, but that ended when I was like 10. I was like, oh no, that's not the lifestyle that I want, nor do I want to spend that much time in school to study that long. So around 12, I was really into music, and I thought maybe one day I could do music professionally, learn how to just play music or write music or something in the field of music is what I thought I would do. And, back in the days when I was growing up, we were notoriously known for being latchkey kids. So that meant that after school, go home, make our own meal. And I had a lot of fun just dreaming of weird dishes to cook for myself. And my mom did teach me how to make instant noodles.
Mm-hmm.
So I would make instant noodles at home, and then I would add weird things to it from like the night's leftover. And I just always loved eating as a kid, not because like the act of eating. It was more just the idea of eating, like eating was always so celebratory and this like wonderful thing in the way we viewed food.
Yeah. Did you have a big family?
I did not have a huge family. So there was my mom, my dad, and then my 2 siblings and myself. So there were 5 of us. And then at dinner time, it was always like we had to gather to eat together and just spend time together. And my mom worked, so my sister and I often helped her do some odds and ends and do some preparation. And it was always so fun.
I know your parents were fish distributors, or they had a fish. How did they get into that business early on?
So my dad was, when he came, he did a lot of different jobs, but ultimately ended up as a fish salesperson for a Japanese fish company. And I think that's where he learned how to work within the business. Mm-hmm. And of course, being the entrepreneur that he always was, he wanted to have his own business. And he built it. He purchased a really small market somewhere in Los Angeles. I don't even know where now. But he started selling like, fish at the retail level. Mm-hmm. And then eventually moved up and then eventually opened up a distribution channel. So my mom and my dad worked together to, create the business and like really see it through, and it became part of our lives.
Did they move here and start that? What did they do before? Like, what was their background in?
My dad had an accounting background, and then, but when they moved here, he did like a lot of different jobs. I remember hearing about him making donuts at one point, and then he even worked as a bus person at Laurie's Prime Rib.
Wow.
Yes, and then so he did a lot of different jobs, and then my grandparents were dentists.
Okay.
So my mom was she did, I forget the name of the actual work that she does, but basically she would do like when people had make dentures and things like that.
Yeah. She
would do all the like sculpting of it.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked for somebody where she did like all the, like to refine the fake teeth.
Yes. Yep.
So that's what her job was. And I think she really enjoyed that.
Yeah. And early on, you're around food, you love eating, you love the concept of food and what it means, bringing people together and just kind of like that experience. What kind of motivates you early on to want to not just, going into any industry, food included, it's like it could mean so many different things, right? Mm-hmm. It could mean working at a restaurant. It could mean opening up your own restaurant. Mm-hmm. It could mean like becoming a world-class chef. Like there's a whole a spectrum there. What was your motivation? How big was your motivation? Like, did you envision yourself being where you are today, or did you kind of just start from, one step after another?
I think for myself, it was, I was 21 at the time, and that's when I'd come back from Japan, and I was thinking, I don't think the music thing is going to pan out in Japan. It's just too hard. I can't, survive within this industry, or just, I don't know my way around it enough to be realistic about it. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, I need to find a career. I need to get serious. I need to, do something with my life that will help, create a path moving forward. And so I'd spent the summer before I came back from Japan at a relative's ryokan, which is a Japanese inn. And then I took time there and, started working in the kitchen, of course, wash dishes and just help plate small things. And I thought, I really enjoy spending my time like this, because before that I had a lot of jobs as a teenager doing different things.
Yeah. And
this was it was the kind of work that I could really envision myself doing, because it was most immersive.
Yep.
And I enjoyed that feeling of just being focused and doing this work that was so intricate, but also so enjoyable.
Yeah, like you were in a state of flow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was. I felt that it was just it matched who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm incredibly impatient. So I love how with cooking, there's an idea, there's a process, and then there's a result all within a certain amount of time that could be accounted for today.
Right.
So there wasn't a moment wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And I just knew that this would be the right path for me.
Yeah.
And then when I started out, I used to watch this show called Great Chefs of Chicago. And then they had executive chefs and sous chefs and all these different levels of chefs. And I thought to myself, wow, one day if I could become an executive chef, that would be amazing. Like I could support myself. I don't have to depend on my family. I could be, an adult.
Yeah.
And I think that's as far as I thought of when I first started culinary school. I just thought, well, this is a career that is real and could take me somewhere. I could support myself. I could do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then back in the days when I was going to culinary school, there are very few, there's definitely no TV shows that they have today. None of that Top Chef thing or anything like that. So it wasn't a glamorous type of work. It was more just, a very artisanal, a very, day-to-day type of work that people were doing.
Yeah.
But I always loved the idea that food could bring people joy, that it can make people happy. And I remember as a kid, the happiest moments always was about food, about, New Year's or about Thanksgiving or gatherings. And as a teenager, I tried to host my own little dinner party. I had this great idea of how I was going to make these things called Japanese-style hamburger steak.
Mm-hmm.
Never made it before. Invited all my friends to come over. There were probably 8 of us. We sat at the dinner table. I set it up and it was so fun, but I was so bad at it. It was not a delicious dinner, but it was the gathering, the anticipation, the knowing that they would come and I would host them and we would spend this time together, pretend to be adults.
Yeah.
And it was just something that I really loved. So when I first opened a naka, that was the concept behind it, that it was going to be like a dinner party where people would come and I would cook for them. And it was that idea, the idea of that, that I really wanted to share with people.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anyone, I know at the time you said it was a different time, chefs weren't front and center. It wasn't they weren't celebrities. They weren't, it wasn't this glamorous thing. They were back of the kitchen cooking, doing their thing. Was there anyone that you looked at as an inspiration? Anyone specifically? Or was it just the concept of everything you're saying?
I think it was a result of my first job where I worked at Takao restaurant in Brentwood.
Yep.
Chef Takao had worked with Nobu Matsuhisa at his original location on La Cienega. And this was a whole different type of Japanese food that they were all doing at that moment. It was very different from the ones that I experienced growing up. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was like, oh my gosh, Mr. Matsuhisa, he's doing such an amazing thing, creating this Japanese food that so many people were able to gravitate towards and they were enjoying. And it was a different version of Japanese food. So I was very inspired by that during my early days, because I thought how amazing to see Japanese food in a different format, in a different way, to bring it into a place where so many people could accept it and understand it and create these new ideas with it. And I thought, I guess to answer your question, I guess that would be Mr. Matsuhisa when I was...
Interesting, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at Takao was when you sort of got the exposure into how, how much the customer mattered,
yes.
and remembering, everyone that came through those doors,
yes,
and what they ordered and what their experience is like, what they didn't like, what they did like. And I know you've implemented that and even made it even bigger here at Naka. That experience, was that the only place that you saw that, or was it something, is it back in Japan? Is that how not every, but most, restaurants are?
I feel like that is definitely a Japanese concept with the idea of omotenashi. The idea of really taking care of your guests above and beyond.
Yeah.
like walking your guests out after their dinner or trying to set up, should they want to visit somewhere else, you do your best to help, facilitate that relationship for them so that they can have the next place to go to. It was just more than about food. It was about taking care of an experience and continuing that experience through that care. And that was something that I thought was incredibly humbling and also very, very, I guess it's nurturing too at the same time. But to care for a person's experience at that level really resonated with my idea of what I wanted to do here.
Yeah. And I mean, to say like specifically, like I know you keep binders of everyone who's come through these doors and what they've ordered. And that way, when they come back, you're giving them a different experience, something that, which I personally, like, I just haven't seen anywhere else, which I think is awesome. And I think it must be a logistical nightmare behind the scenes, but I'm sure you figured out a system that's worked.
I think in the early days, it was a lot easier to just throw things together and be like, hey, this is a good idea, and just put it together and, serve it. But now I'm far more careful because along with growing as a chef, there are also things that happen along the way. The dishes that we do now are far more, like, they're a little bit more complicated, and there are a lot of things that go into play to make these dishes happen, from like the original idea to actually executing and the presentation and how we're gonna prep it in the back. So there are a lot more steps along the way. So I can't fully like turn a whole different menu the way I used to because I want to be more careful.
Yeah.
But I definitely want people to experience different things when they come. Yeah. So even if we don't swap out every single dish on the menu, at least a few dishes that are different will create a different experience. I want people to have a different experience when they come, because the moment that they experience and naka has already passed what their past experience was. And every moment should be a moment in and of itself that is of now, is my idea.
Does anyone say, I loved my experience, I want the same exact experience next time?
Sometimes we're very apologetic, because if we have a guest that came last week and we're like, they're coming this week again, we are like, as much as we love to swap out everything, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. We can eat the same things. But I always think, like, part of the reason why we don't give people menus at the get-go is because one of the things that you should experience here is this unknowing of what's to come. Yeah. So if that unknowing happens, you're more engaged at that moment, more in the moment, more just open to the experience, versus like, oh, I know what's coming next. I know what's going to happen. And I think that takes away from an experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What do you drive inspiration from to like have all these different, creations, right? Like you have stuff that you've prepared and served before, but I'm sure you have so many things going on in your head of what's to come. Where does this come from? Do you have like a certain like place that you draw inspiration from?
Well, I definitely start with the most traditional book that for the season, that every year it's the same 4 books of every season. And then I always have to remind myself what Japanese food really is about, just to like recenter the madness. And then from there, of course, it's like very heavily seasonally driven and ingredient driven. But sometimes it's like, I feel like it's a constant work in progress. Like sometimes I'll think I have the format figured out, but it doesn't always work that way. It's always like ever changing, constantly evolving on me. And I can't seem to catch it all the time. But the inspiration definitely comes from definitely the ingredients being good.
Yep.
That's but what things feel like, I guess, like who I am at that moment too. And for example, I'm working on a new dish for our starter dish because the time has come to change it. And I haven't really spent too much time thinking about it. I jot down notes here and there. And then last night I just woke up in like the middle of the night and I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I can't sleep. And then my brain starts working. Oh, you should do this. You should do that. I'm like, not now. Why at 4 in the morning? But then I was like, it's okay. And then I just write it down. And then it's like from that, then like, for example, today I'll work on some of those ideas that popped in last night and see how that goes. And then there's this, every menu we create, I feel like there's a tie-in that's added from the previous menu that keeps piling on, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like these concepts, these ideas, things that could happen. So last season we worked with asparagus, and during white asparagus, and during that time, like I was recognizing, of course, its time is so short. But wouldn't it be amazing to carry that into the next season? Because we have a dish on the menu that's about the future season and the past season. And it's like, okay, we could there's a tie-in. So there's a part of me that thinks if you came for the last season, you'll understand this tie-in that is happening this season, which means that time has changed and things have evolved, but there's this connection. Yeah. I think as I've done this restaurant for now 13 years, there's just so many tie-ins that can happen that wasn't available to me when we first opened. It was all about like these random ideas.
And I know before you had Azami, which was your first restaurant, I believe, that you opened, right? That one was more like you were serving like more traditional, like sushi and those kinds of dishes. And from what I know, it wasn't the most fulfilling experience, I guess, because you felt like, and you can say in your own words, but it was like something that was being served everywhere. It wasn't like, it was hard for you to kind of bring yourself to it and like this unique kind of approach to doing what you wanted.
Yes. Yeah. I think because it was a sushi bar, so there was, the wonderful thing about it was this actual connection to the guests that you can see right in front of you and have this like relationship that you get to develop with people and get to know their preferences and their ideas and the things that they like. And there are so many moments when I learned from the other guests what they were eating elsewhere, and then it would spark interest, and then I would try to create my own versions of what they were eating. But it was a lot harder because there's only so many things that you can, because within the structure of sushi, there's only so many things that you should do to sushi to like not go crazy. And it's a very technical art form, and I think it's wonderful, and it has an amazing place in Japanese cuisine, and I love the simplicity of it. So there's no desire to riff on it and go crazy on it. But I just wanted to feel this movement that I didn't always get to feel there, and there was this like idea of trying new flavor profiles or doing different things and just being able to constantly evolve. Yeah. And having, it currently in naka, like having it be, I mean, you would call it Japanese cuisine. Is everything coming from Japanese inspired like techniques and or are there other like cuisines that you've sort of tried to fuse or tried to draw inspiration from to sort of create dishes out of? I think for the most part, what we try to do is be very specific and honor Japanese food, but sometimes the ingredients just are not available. For example, we're serving this dish called ayu. It's a sweet fish, and it's a summer fish from Japan that lives in like the lakes, and it's really beautiful. And it's usually served with this plant called tade, which is water pepper, and it grows along the side and the banks of the lake. But that's totally not available here. And so we have to think of, well, what's that flavor profile like, and how do we come as close as possible? So our solution was to use tomatillo. It's earthy. It's like, it has this very floral but green flavor like profiles. Yeah. So a lot of times we're not intentionally wanting to mix these like ingredients, but we have to find the wonderful substitutions that work with this dish. And plus it allows us to express California or, the area that we're in, Los Angeles, a lot more, and keeping in line with what kaiseki really is about.
Yeah. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. So I want to talk about kaiseki, which is I mean, you could tell me what it is, but what is traditional kaiseki? Where does it come from? Like, what are the origins? And then I know you're doing like a modern kind of version of that. So tell me like kind of where it comes from, and then over time how you've sort of modernized it.
So kaiseki originated in Buddhist monasteries, and it's a form of tea ceremony. So there's two different types of writing in Japanese language for kaiseki. There's the one where it's like about the stone, which is the traditional one. It's the tea ceremony one. It's fully vegan. It's very small, very humble. And then there's another writing of it, which is like a banquet, also pronounced kaiseki. And that one was an evolution of the original tea ceremony to honor samurais that came back from battle, and like banquet style.
Yeah.
So ours is more the banquet style, of course, because we're not doing this humble tea ceremony. It's more extravagant. It originated in Kyoto. So it was about definitely honoring seasonality and nature and the ingredients. It's a celebration of nature, which is what I love about it so much. So our take on it has always been, the traditional format is just like honoring different styles of cooking methods in a certain order based on what the chef thinks is most fitting. And then just basically keeping in line with Zen philosophy and Buddhist ideas where less is more. So very simple, very traditional kaiseki format is always about, honoring that ingredient about this time and place. But for us, we feel that, for me personally, I think in order to truly experience that kind of cuisine and in that way it was intended, it's something that you should definitely try in Japan.
Yeah.
Because those ingredients are just not the same that we can get in LA. We can come as close as possible, but it's never going to be like, oh, they just caught it this morning and I have it this afternoon.
Is there anywhere in Japan specifically that you think does it best?
I think Kyoto is definitely the place to enjoy that very traditional style of kaiseki, because that's where it came from, and they do an incredible job, sourcing the vegetables and the seafood and things like that.
Are most restaurants there like that?
There's a lot of restaurants there that are like that, but I think the more famous ones, the two famous ones are definitely in Kyoto, and then there are a few famous ones as well in Tokyo, because it's kind of like, it's just a natural evolution of how things move.
Customers are rushing to your store. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/founderhour. Once again, go to shopify.com/founderhour to take your retail business to the next level today. Tell me about the time when you had to sell Azami. I think it was like 2008.
Yes.
What was going through your head? Why? What were you kind of wanting to do next? Did you have the idea for naka like immediately? Then like you wanted to just create the space. You wanted to move away from that concept and just create a new space, or did it take time to get there? And what were you doing in that time to come to this sort of vision and realization?
So at Azami, I did play with a few set menus that were kind of more in line with what kaiseki was, and by the end of Azami, I was really burnt out. I was just like, I'm just so tired. I just want to take time off. Yeah. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want to do anything. I just want to, live life a little bit more. But I always had it in the back of my mind that one day I would open a restaurant that was very in line with what I imagined a restaurant that I wanted to have be. And it just so happened that toward the end of Azami and Naka, the space came up. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm not ready to just jump and dive right in. I want to take time and figure it all out. But the space was available. So, we took it. I mean, I signed on for it, but I didn't move into it right away because I was just not ready.
What was it before? I mean, did you have to tear it down completely?
No, so the space was a spa on one side and it was a construction company on the other.
Okay.
So it was a husband and wife team that had two different businesses running out from it.
Nice.
And then when I first saw the space, I was like, this is perfect because I just always wanted something small.
Yeah.
Because I thought small is easy to handle, easy to take care of. And when I saw the space, it was just perfect. And I thought, I will sign on, but I'm not ready. I'm definitely not ready. So I just wanted to take some time, maybe like travel the world, like be a bum for a bit and, live out my like dreams of what being young was supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
But my sister, I love her, decided to, open this little kind of like little deli place out where we were living, where I was at in Arcadia. And she's like, I got this space. I think it's going to be amazing. I think you should open something there. And I was like,
what kind of deli?
It was, so it was like, we originally imagined like maybe a little Japanese style deli where you could do like pick up like little side dishes to take home and eat with your meal.
Mm-hmm.
But that proved to be really hard and unpredictable, especially because that wasn't what I was accustomed to doing and not my expertise. So I was like, maybe we should evolve it and turn it into like at least a casual lunch place. And then one day I was like driving and listening to NPR and they were talking about this restaurant that was a deli during the daytime. And at nighttime, they host these special dinner parties. I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I should do here at the space. And I thought that was going to be amazing because at least I could keep cooking in the way that I want to cook and then, sort of get a feel for what the future of naka should be like. And so I spent 2 years doing that and it was so fun and so exciting. I cooked like for 10 people a night, 12 people a night. And I thought, this is amazing. It's so much more enjoyable than, like standing in front of a sushi bar and having to like take care of so many things at once. I used to joke like, I wish I was an octopus because there's that scene in, I think it was Monsters Inc. where the octopus had 8 legs and could do all these things at the same. I was like, that's what I need. But yes, so it was the idea. It was the fact that I could plan something and work with that plan and then have it work out exactly according to plan. Sometimes not exactly, but for the most part, that's what I enjoyed most about it. And I sort of modeled the whole concept of that from that experience of that restaurant experience with naka.
Yeah, and so many things that start small and like there's all this energy there and it's going well. At some point when you start to it become like a real thing in a business and you start to scale it and try to sometimes or a lot of times that magic kind of disappears because having a full-on business is so different than just having some friends over and cooking. Because I know a lot of restaurants that have started that way or like chefs that started that way. How did you sort of keep maintaining or continue to maintain that? Because once you start opening up a restaurant and hiring people, now you have bills to pay. And, were there any challenges early on until it got to a point where, I mean, I don't know how quickly it got to a point where it became, I know you got two Michelin stars and, it's everywhere now, but before that.
I feel like if I could be honest, that part felt a lot easier than this part, like where I am now, because it was I had this idea of that, I was going to build this restaurant. And if I have people come in, that would be great. And if we didn't have enough reservations, I could just close and just take a day off. And that kind of freedom spoke to me because I was just like, I don't have this massive overhead that I did at the other restaurant.
Yeah.
I didn't have a business partner that I had to worry about, like I could just do whatever I want. There was just this freedom attached to it. And that part felt very inspiring. And I say that, like you were talking about in our earlier careers, or anything we start that's new, there's just this feeling of being offensive, like being on the offense side of things. Like you just have to keep going. And after you reach a certain level, then there's this tendency to fall into the defensive mode where you have to protect, like maintain. And then I think it's landing on that defensive side that could potentially pull you down, because then you don't have that crazy hope, crazy like bravado to do something that is like out there and create, and like, you know, it's just, you have to maintain a certain level of things. And I always have to remind myself, like in like today, with my mindset, is this a defensive mindset or is this an offensive mindset? Because that defensive mindset will definitely make you not take risks in ways that when you're being on the offense side of things, you'll do those risks, and that's what makes you grow.
Yep.
Instead of like, you know, contracts you. So to answer your question, I think early on it felt a lot easier because there was like, I didn't feel any sense of responsibility toward other people as much as toward myself and to our guests and to like the 3 employees that I had. There wasn't like a heavy burden on my shoulder, and it felt easy and fun. Totally.
And I feel like so many people miss that mark, you know, of like, that's what it's all about. And you start, I mean, you know, people say like, don't, you know, let the business work for you, don't work for the business type of thing. Like you get lost into it sometimes where, like you said, you start playing the defense.
Right.
And then that's why probably so many, not just restaurants, but businesses fail, is because you're not, you know, like you said, taking risks, innovating, and you have to be constantly doing that in a world where there's so many options, there's just so much happening, right? So much noise in so many different industries where if you want to sort of be on the forefront, you have to continue to,
for sure,
innovate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, right now, as much as possible, we try to take the non-defensive stance. It's the offensive stance now just requires so much more detail. Like in the beginning, there wasn't like, I didn't really pay that much attention to all the details.
Sure.
But now there's so many details that you still have to pay attention to while still trying to be innovative and go crazy at the same time. So there's like this, like sort of tidying up a lot. There's a lot of tidying up of crazy ideas. Yeah. And luckily my wife and partner, Carole, is really good at that, even though she hates it. She's just like such a wonderful support system for that and reminds me all the time that that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And how to like, we have to hone in on those ideas in order to allow that growth but still be really good at it, not messy.
Yeah. And how's that experience been, you know, working with Carole, you know, obviously in the kitchen, like it could be a stressful place, I'm sure, like, you know, being partners in life outside of the kitchen, like, has it been like, I'm sure there are times when you might get on each other's nerves, but overall, it sounds like it's been just a great experience.
It's been a great experience. Of course, it has its challenges. I know there are so many times she wants to kill me. And though I don't tell her, I want to kill her too sometimes. But it's a very mutual thing. But overall, it's wonderful to have like this completely committed partner who has the same vision of what you want this little place to be. And then to have that on your side, it just feels like everything's that much easier.
Yep.
And of course, there's disagreements on how to get there. But overall, like to be able to see each other's perspective is really important. I think there's always, I think one of the most important things in an environment like the one that Carole and I work in is that we have to be in tune with each other's like feelings a lot and to be considerate of those feelings.
Yeah.
And then always to remember to be grateful and, you know, say thank you.
Yeah.
even though you sometimes just take everything for granted.
Right.
You as in me.
You're like, it's implied, but no, you have to actually say it.
Yes. I thought you knew that I'm grateful.
Yeah, like, what do you mean?
I know. I was like, what are you talking about?
Let's talk about the space. What went into designing it originally? And then I know it was this year, like a couple months ago, that you fully reopened with the new design. Tell me like what the inspiration was early on and why you decided to revamp it.
So I was like thinking about my career one day while I was taking a bath. And I was like, there's probably 5 things left that I want to do that are really important to me. Then I started like thinking about it. And one of them came up where like, okay, I definitely would like to see a naka in a new setting. And this was last year. And I was like, before I finish off my career, I want to see a naka in a way that I never imagined it could be, but have always wanted it to be. And then I sort of threw the idea out, and Carole was like, oh, hell no, are you crazy? That's like so much undertaking, and there's so much involved into making it happen, because she's always so logical about things like that, where I'm just like, wouldn't it be great?
Yeah. And
then, so I was telling her that, it's really important after a certain amount of time that our evolution is experienced not just through the food, but through the whole space itself. That, we've changed so much since we've opened a naka inside the kitchen, but it hasn't always been reflected outside of the kitchen, in the dining space, in the environment. And then we were saying how that would be the one thing that would really like bring it all together, like to have it be a very cohesive experience, to be reflective of who we are now. So that's how the journey began.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Have you seen the movie The Menu?
I have. I laughed the whole time because it was just like so hilarious.
It was perfect. I think Dominic Crenn, who I've had on the show. I think she was like involved in making that movie. But it was so perfect. But it was like this, like kind of like destroying it and then like rebuilding. Like it's like that whole concept, which makes so much sense. Obviously, to Carole's point, it is a big undertaking, right?
Yes.
It's like to have to completely change, and it is a risk, right? Like what if the new design doesn't, people don't like it, and you're not going to go back to the old one. So it's like there's all that goes into it. But how did you like even begin to think about what you wanted it to be? Like what was the kind of underlying inspiration or vision for it?
I think because, since the time we've opened until now, so many restaurants have come up and so many beautiful things have been built. And I can't help but be like a little bit envious every time I go to a restaurant where like the space is new and it feels beautiful and it's so like with the time.
Yeah.
And I felt like even though the space we had was so minimalistic and also like it could withstand time.
Totally. Yeah.
I just felt that I wanted something that was new. I'm the kind of person that just gravitates toward these like crazy new ideas, new things. Like I get excited about new things all the time, and that drives a lot of people around me crazy. But like,
do you get bored by?
I do get bored. I do get bored, and I always tease like, well, it's not like I could quit my job and go find another one. Right. But at least if I change the inside, it'll feel like I got a new job.
Yeah. No, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I know it sounded crazy, like, it's not that we were struggling or anything. So why change when things there's nothing wrong? And I was like, it's the fear of being complacent. I think it's that fear of like growing into this place or just becoming this thing that just sort of continues to age and being complacent to all these things. I think that's the worst thing that could happen to people, but to businesses, like it just becomes, don't get me wrong, there's definitely room for tradition and keeping everything, and people love a restaurant that they've been going to 30 years that hasn't changed, and there's a special place for that. But I think at our level, it has to continue and to evolve.
That's so true, and it's so interesting when you talk about it. It kind of sounds so obvious, right? Like, why be complacent? Just like keep changing. But like in theory, it sounds, and in practice, it's like most people can't get themselves to get to that point to just completely change everything, right? And it's just like I don't know. I'm not a psychologist to understand why. I don't know. It just seems like you have to have this thing in you that you're not attached to a certain thing or lifestyle, or I don't know what it could, because that risk, I think the fear is so strong in people, where it's like, if I change something, what if it fails? And then I don't have the life I have anymore, or I lose the people around me, or, like things like that. But it almost sounds like you don't have that fear.
Well, I think the funniest thing is like when I'm in the kitchen and I see our team, and I feel like, oh, they're so comfortable with what we're doing. And then that's like the sign, like, I need to blow this up. Like to make them, to make them uncomfortable again.
Yep.
And then, like when we actually do that, like change the whole menu or change things on the menu on them. Like, I hate myself. It's like, why do I do this? It's so painful. Like the changing of all the dishware, the remaking of the, prep list, the like everything. There's just so much involved in it. And it's like, why do I do this to myself? But it's like, after a certain point on the menu, I'm just like, I can't make this dish anymore. It's enough. Like we've hit the point where we have to change it out so that people are like on the edge again.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that feeling where everybody's like not comfortable helps them focus a little bit more, because they understand how important everything is. Like when they get too comfortable, when we all get too comfortable, that's when things start like falling by the wayside. Like, oh, there's a mistake there, because we're not as alert as we should be. Yep. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe in honing a skill for a long time and going deeper and like learning all the like minute details of something, which means like we plan menus that are based off of what they were doing before, but just a different version, but still the same techniques and same things that they should be looking for, just working with something new.
Yeah, totally. It's always interesting when I meet someone that has sort of found their ikigai, right? Like it's like they know who they are, they know what they're good at, they know they found something that people love and the world really needs, and I think that allows them to just be incredible and great at what they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you try to surround yourself with people, do you try to find people that sort of fit that mold also? Because I know it's really hard for someone who is building something, who might be a visionary in something, to also have like work with a team that perhaps every single person is that same way. Just I don't know if the odds don't allow for that sometimes. But what is your process for that?
I think for my process, I definitely there a few things that are very important to me within the environment that we're all working in. Is number one, they have to be genuinely good human beings. Number two, they also have to care. I think it's the care that makes the biggest difference in a place like ours. It's like, because they care, and they care so much that they're willing to change because of that care, change who they are. And I think that's an important characteristic to have, because change is hard. It's like stretching yourself and learning new things and seeing the things that are not good about yourself and wanting to improve on those things, and things that are how we can help each other grow. I think that's always been the kind of team that we feel that is the right team for us.
Yeah. So if someone is listening who is like in culinary school or wants to become a chef at some point, what advice do you give them?
I always tell them, remember why you cook, and always ask yourself and be honest with yourself. Like, what is the reason for cooking for you? Like for everybody, it's a different story. But it's my hope that the main reason is that they really just want to make other people happy.
Yeah. In terms of the future, like what do you have kind of in store in your head? Do you think that every like 10 years you're just going to like redo the restaurant? And or I know you have in Soto, which is the other restaurant that you also opened, or is it?
Yes.
It's a
restaurant. Yes. Restaurant. So yeah. it's a restaurant that Carole and I opened during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that for myself, I always tell Carole that there's only so many years that I should do naka. And then when I'm ready to like let it go, I will close it like as naka. Like there should be no more naka when I'm done, because it was a very personal journey, personal story I wanted to tell. And there is so many things tied to it that is just like, I mean, the name comes from my name. Right. So it's like, it'd be weird if it's still naka and the person cooking here wasn't.
Yeah. It was like Richard Smith was cooking.
Yeah. I mean, like, I just feel that it's a story that should have an end as well. And I think when that time comes, I will definitely close naka the way it is. And I was teasing and like sort of half jokingly telling Carole that maybe when I retire, I won't even cook. I'll just sit there and just like wait for things to happen. And I was like, maybe I'll never want to go into the kitchen and hold another knife. And she's like, I don't think so.
Yeah, you don't strike me as the type of person that'll just sit there. That's for sure.
I was like, there's so many other things I want to do.
You mentioned 5 things that came to you when you were taking a bath. One of them was the redesign. What's the other 4?
So it was all like restaurant related. I was like, I need to write a cookbook, which has been like in my head for the longest time. But I don't want it to just be another cookbook. I want it to really have this like a lot more because we finally have a history. Yeah. So to be able to put that history in and to like give more background to how the ideas came about or what the inspiration was, felt like the kind of story I want to tell in a cookbook. And then another was like, well, if we ever get that 3rd Michelin star, that would be amazing. Yep. And then the other 2, I'm probably going to keep to myself because it's a little bit embarrassing to talk about. But I just want everyone to know it's all restaurant related, and naka related.
Yeah. What did it feel like getting the 2 Michelin stars? I mean, did it really feel like was it just a part of the journey, and you're like, okay, we just keep going, or did it really feel like you had gotten to a place where you really wanted to get to, and everything else was like a cherry on top?
I felt like it was incredibly validating because I feel very fortunate enough to have a restaurant that people wanted to talk about and the stories behind who we were as people. There was all these things about like who we are as people and, our restaurant and things like that. But to actually be recognized for the work that we were doing felt very validating. Like it was like, I can't believe it's happening to us. But it was really a wonderful experience because I know there's always controversy with awards and things like that. And, people often have this opinion of like, well, who's to judge what's good and what's not? And
right, because food is such a subjective thing.
Totally. Yeah. And there's definitely a place for that. But then I want to take away just strip it down to what the idea and philosophy is. Like, oh, it's about, being good at your skill, using good ingredients, being able to tell a story. Like those things, what I deem are important, are the things that I want to celebrate with the recognition.
Not to mention like the defensive stance, when you have Michelin stars, it's like you want to maybe stick to what got you those Michelin stars. A lot of people, right? And that's why they don't really change anything about the experience. Right. It's like if we do that, then what if people come and they're like, this is not a 2 Michelin star restaurant?
Right.
Like, what the heck? What did these people see in this restaurant type of thing?
Right. And I think with that in mind, I was like, well, at the end of the day, while, those are really important like milestones for a restaurant like ours to experience, I still want to be true to what we do. Yeah. Like if who I am at that moment isn't reflective of what Michelin stands for, or I can't pretend to be somebody else in order to maintain that. Like I need to just be true. And I think that'll make me happier than like bending myself in all different ways just to appease these ideas of things.
Yeah. Well, Chef Niki, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm excited to
thank you
to buy the cookbook when it comes out and try some of the stuff at home. But this has been a pleasure, and I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story. And
thank you for having me, Patrick. I hope people listen and feel inspired too.
This was great. Thank you.
Thanks.